Hey, Real Estate Rockstars. This is Aaron Amuchastegui. I am back today for the Real Estate Rockstars podcast. I get to interview one of my good friends, Paul Campbell. I met Paul probably 10 years ago. Maybe we'll talk about some of those experiences that we got to have together, but we're going to mostly focus on real estate. Paul, how's it going, man?
Man, it is a beautiful day. Thank you for having me, buddy. It's good to do this with you.
Yeah, the always good to see your face. I love it when you get to come out and visit Austin. But usually I get to ask people where you calling in from. I want to talk about where you do real estate, but today you're actually calling in from Greece.
I am just this island Crete. We discovered it on a cruise of all things and fell in love. So doing a little work from here.
Awesome. One of the benefits of real estate or being a real estate agent or investor is once you dial in your business, once you put in the time and effort, you've got options to work from anywhere. You get to work on vacation, if you still call it a vacation or not. And when you are doing real estate and you're back home, where's home?
Home is Portland, Oregon. Home of the
Uh,
protests.
Home, oh yeah, Portland. I think a lot of people know. I grew up in Southern Oregon. I know Portland well, and but I have not been there in quite some time. Been a beautiful city most of my life, and right now it's a pretty controversial place. And I think we've got probably listeners on both sides of that argument or that understanding of what happens up in Portland. How long you been doing real estate up there?
I have been doing real estate my entire life since I can even remember, man. I fell into it as an accident and stayed into it. I got a love-hate relationship with it. I've been doing it for so long, I don't even think I qualify to do anything else. I don't even think they could hire me at Starbucks, man. I'm real estate for life.
Yeah, real estate for life. How did you get into it?
Oh, goodness. I was a mortgage broker back before they regulated that industry at all. I fell into that when I lost my job at US Bank. I don't even remember how that happened. It was so long ago. I think I was 20. The market started to shift. I mean, we've all talked about the crash, right? So as the market was shifting, I actually had the dumb luck or the foresight or whatever you want to call it to jump into short sale negotiations. And
Hmm.
then I got my real estate license. And then, as the mortgage market got weird, I stuck with the real estate license and negotiated short sales for years until we managed to clear the crash.
Was that in like '07, '08?
Yeah. I think I started negotiating short sales in '05.
Oh wow,
I
that was
started
when
noticing when I was in the broker world that all of my broker reps were shorting stock for the companies they were representing. And I thought, hey, this might be something.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, "We think we're going under, but we're still trying to write some loans." That was a really, really wild time, way back
Yeah.
then. So you started doing, short sales, and then your career has, like, kind of merged and changed all through it. So you've been an agent now for freaking 20 years-ish.
At least,
The
at
what
least.
Yeah, at least 20. What's something that you know now that you wish you would have known at the beginning before, and I would say before you chose to get into real estate. It sounds like you didn't choose it. It sounds like it was like you needed a job. It was a job that you get hired for, and then you just stuck around. But what is something that you know now that you think when you first got in early on, you wish you would have known?
That is a brilliant but impossible to answer question, buddy, because there are so many lessons that I've picked up over the last quarter of a decade. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is a boring one, and that's do your taxes and do them correctly. When you come into
Yeah.
the real estate world, you're 1099 for the first time. If you're young, you're getting big checks. And you know, there's some basic business principles that just don't really get taught in the real estate world. And you really have to focus on that. And you got to have a solid foundation because if you don't have a solid foundation, you're going to end up rebuilding your business multiple times, which I've ended up having to do. Um, and it's real stressful.
Yeah. What are a couple of those business, like, practices? A couple things that, like, when you realize, like, you didn't know, or that most new agents, they just got their first $5,000 check, $10,000 check. What should they be thinking about?
how to incorporate yourself correctly, how to structure your, your tax allocations, what to do when you get a 1099. Um, Real estate, especially as an agent, it's kind of this hybrid thing, right? Like you're supposed to be this self-employed person, but you're really under the umbrella of usually a Keller Williams or some big company, right? EXP or my company, which I love now, Epic. And they shield you from a lot of that. But on the flip side, there's not a lot of education there either. So you really should talk to a tax consultant, some bookkeepers, get yourself a money real estate accountant, and get your team together, because otherwise you're building your business on a foundation of sand, and it'll go away just as quick as a shifting wind.
Yeah. For people that get kind of overwhelmed with that idea, I remember when we first got into business, one simple thing, if I was going to give like a little step by step guide for an agent, I would say if you're going to make over $60,000 a year, which why would you be in any business if you don't think you can? If you're going to make over
Mhm.
$60,000 a year, first you want to set up an S Corp, and you want to set up an S Corp that all of your commission checks go into. You want to have a separate bank account for that. And then all of your expenses that you have regarding your business get paid from that account. And so the whatever it is, you have a separate account that all your commissions go into and all your expenses come out of. That way, I mean, our first couple of years, we just showed up at the accountant with a box of receipts and a checking statement, right? And they are able to actually do that as long as you use one account for it. You don't have to be a QuickBooks expert. You would be anything. You also have to set up payroll, but there's lots of little places that can do that. So there's like ADP or Paychecks, or there's a million different companies that the you can just set up like this auto payroll on. And so you could choose a salary. Hey, my monthly salary is going to be $4,000 a month or $5,000 a month, even if you're making $10,000 checks or $20,000 checks a month. Some of the best advice we've heard from Daniel Del Real is one of our mastermind members. I remember when he talked about no matter what he was doing, he paid himself a salary, he lived off that salary. And then periodically he could give himself bonus checks, right? But you don't spend if you're going on a trip, you don't use your company account to do it. You write yourself a check. The accountant at the end of the year can see that as an equity or profit with disbursement. And the reason people S corp instead of just doing it all in one account anyway is the idea that there's just different you get taxed different. That first 50,000 that's payroll gets taxed heavier than that tax that you're getting as just an equity investment. So if nothing else, set up an S corp, set up a payroll system where you're getting paid the same. All of your expenses come out of that account. And then you should, if you're doing a good job over several months, you'll start to see the money in the account grow. But again, you don't have to be an accounting expert to do that. So that's my little 3-minute explanation of how we did it when we started. That was one of Paul's big challenges out there.
That's not a
You know,
sexy conversation, but what you just said is gospel, and it'll save people millions of dollars over their career. Like, no joke.
yeah, it's so real and so simple. And the people like to overcomplicate it, and so that's my most simplified version of how to get yourself set up in a couple hours and how to follow it your first year or two in real estate. I reached out to you. I want to say it was probably a year ago. A friend of mine, good friend of mine, reached out to me and he said, "Hey, my house is scheduled for foreclosure. I had this major catastrophe happen, and it was a crazy personal tragedy that he had to deal with, and a major
Yeah.
catastrophe that he had to deal with. He had to be gone for several months. As a result, he came back. His mortgage was behind. He was scheduled for foreclosure, and he said, Aaron, what do I do?" And we looked at his house, and I was like, "Well, this is one of those kind of unique setups where he was scheduled for foreclosure for non-payment, but his house was actually worth more than his loan was, and he happened
A
to
good
live
deal.
nearby you up there." Yeah, and so a good deal. And so he was days away from losing his house in foreclosure and losing all of his equity. I connected you two because you lived by him and said, "Paul, what can you do? Tell us about what you did at that point. Like what was that process like, if you remember, like how far away was sale? How did you postpone the sale? How did you get the thing sold? How did it turn out for him?"
All right, so we had about 10 days to the original foreclosure date. And I'm just very blessed that all those years that I spent in the trenches with negotiating short sales and doing REO work, I have a pretty good knowledge of, the inner workings of banks and how they view these things. If you don't already know, a bank does not want to foreclose your home. The cost to them is astronomical, and these are giant organizations. They do not have the ability to have, you know, any concept on a micro level of what to do with these individual properties. Some of that's changed over the years. They've gotten a little bit better, but they still pretty well suck. So if you can help them avoid it, it's a win-win. And this particular situation, like these guys had just been through the ringer and they had, close to $250,000 sitting in this house. And if that got taken away from them, that would have just been getting kicked when you're down. Um, and that's just unacceptable. So in order to get a bank to consider moving a foreclosure, in general, you need to have an offer. So we had a two-part strategy. One, we were going to get that listing up with professional pictures as fast as humanly possible at about 97% of market value. We wanted eyeballs on it, and we wanted a first weekend offer. If we didn't get the first weekend offer, then we were gonna have a cash offer from some people that I know that are interested in buying this type of real estate, put it on the table so we could present that to the bank. One of the two was going to happen. And once we had that offer in hand, we were able to communicate with the bank directly. You have to get a third party authorization in order to do that, obviously, and show them, hey, we can solve your problem if you give us 45 days. They agreed, and we were off and running. Now, obviously, those transactions carry a little bit more juice, aka pressure, because you don't want to blow that date with $250,000 of somebody else's money on the line. So you really have to, I don't know, carry that one across the finish line. But we were able to do that. We had the right buyers, we had the right agents, and really, we're pretty fortunate that the bank was receptive to what we were doing, and we got it done for your people.
Yeah. No, I remember, he called me when it was all done, and he was just so grateful because he went
Those are
from
good
losing
people,
his.
man. I was blessed to be able to help them.
Yeah, it was like he went from, he was gonna lose the biggest investment of his life to getting to walk away with cash and having a fresh start, and he was just so stinking happy, and it was at a time when he felt so overwhelmed, and the reason I wanted to bring up that story is a couple fold. One, sometimes in real estate, we get to do some amazing things like that. Two, there's a lot of opportunities like that right now. There are a lot of people that can't make their payments that actually have equity in their house. And unfortunately, I'm not saying it was this case for him, but most of the people that I come across that are going through that, they kind of have their head in the sand
Every time.
until a foreclosure date gets scheduled. They know they're behind, they don't know what to do. They know that maybe they should hire an agent, but they're also like going to work and they're stressed and they're busy and they're trying to pay their regular bills or even their credit card bills or like their kids, just food for their kids. Like they're just like one foot in front of the other. And then they get a foreclosure notice and they're like, oh my gosh. In one of our businesses that we do, we reach out to people that have gotten listed in foreclosure and say, like, hey, is there something we can do to help you? Right? Like do you have any interest in selling your house? And so I think there's huge opportunities like that right now. And if we were going to put that into like a step by step instruction manual for listeners right now. So if you were someone reaches out to you or you find somebody that's like, hey, they're scheduled for auction in 2 weeks, but they have equity. They have equity in their home. Here's the steps that Paul just said. One, in order to get the bank to give you a delay and take you seriously, you need to have a listing. So if you just call and say, hey, I got an offer on this. Can you postpone the sale? And auction is 3 days away. They're not necessarily going to want to restart it. They're not necessarily going to, but before they even called the bank, Paul was like, first, they're going to put it on the market. Nice professional photos so the bank knows that you're serious. And that's part of why they send the foreclosure notice anyway. Like Paul said, they don't want to foreclose, but they want to know you're serious. If they think they're going to foreclose anyway, they don't want to delay it. They don't want to keep waiting if they're going to foreclose anyway. But they want to go through that process. So step one is you got to get a listing agreement signed. You got to post a bunch of professional photos of that, get a nice listing going, maybe even hold that open house that first weekend. So when you reach out to that bank, you can say, here's what we've got. Now, even better is if you can go to the bank with an offer. Hey, we have an offer to sell this home. It's going to cover the debt that we owe you, Mr. Bank. And so you're better off not foreclosing, but we can't close it in the next 10 days because real estate doesn't work like that. So we need a little bit more time. So one, you show them a listing, you tell them you're serious about selling it. You show them that there's a good chance that they can get their money back if it sells. That's step one. You do that, you might be able to get your sale postponed. Two, you come to them with an offer. That's even better. right? And then Paul's like main important thing on both the buyer and the seller side, tons of bank communication after that, like, because the buyer wants the house now, the seller wants that house now. But if you screw up and you don't communicate with the bank, or something gets delayed and you don't let them know what's going on, or God forbid that buyer cancels and you want time to put it in escrow with another buyer, so much communication with them in order to keep that thing going. So it's like a great opportunity for people right now. And then at the end of the day, it is this win-win. In our foreclosure business, when we tell people to reach out to people in foreclosure, we reach out to them, and 9 out of 10 tell you to F off. They tell you they hate you, even when we door knock, right? Like, most of them are like, no, I got it taken care of. I don't need your help. I don't need whatever. And then 1 out of 10 says, oh my God, I need your help. Thank you. Right. And they're going to be that situation. So every time you knock on that door, or call somebody that's a distressed lead that they need to sell their house, just know that, like, the 9 out of 10 that are yelling at you, you're doing it for that 1 out of 10 that actually needs your help. Because it's not a
That
selfish thing to reach out to these people. You're reaching out because you actually have a solution that's going to stop their house from selling in foreclosure, and they're going to make some money.
Well, I think the critical component of that is making sure you're doing good
Where are you
and
getting
good.
all your leads now in real estate?
I gotta be honest with you, man. My focus, my
Yeah.
primary focus these days is not lead oriented or your traditional buyer broker deal. I've been focusing mostly on investments lately, so when I do broker deals, it's all referral based these days. Been around long enough to have a steady stream of those.
So when you were generating stuff, because now you're doing a lot of investments, and we'll talk about your investments in a second. But when you were generating leads, 5, 6, 10 years ago. So somebody right now is saying, Paul, I don't know what to do in this market. It's a little bit slow. How do I get more business? Like, what's the advice you would give them? Because yes, once you have a big enough business and it's referral based, you don't have to do that
Yeah.
anymore. But if you're in your first few years, you have to. What advice would you give them in today's market?
Uh, three sources of leads. Um, Obviously you've got your sphere, and that's tricky. Most people don't necessarily want to hit up grandma for real estate business every couple of weeks. So it's important that your sphere know what you do. Not necessarily get a sales pitch every other day, but know what you do. I can't tell you how many people in my sphere did real estate deals with other people when I was new in the career, just because they had no idea that I was in real estate. Um, so you have to start there. Build your list. Second, there's all kinds of lead generating companies out there, and anything from a big funnel to a very small funnel. You want to have one very large funnel, and you want to have one very small funnel. Obviously, the small stuff is going to cost you more money, so be judicious about that. Make sure that you're putting your money in an area where you are strong, where you understand how to turn those deals. You can also get Google AdWords and various other types of leads these days very cheap. That is a numbers game. You want one of those in your pipeline as well. And the number one thing that you need is you need a CRM that will make sure that you don't lose anybody in that mix. Um, when I first started, I can't tell you how many people I lost that were 6 to 12 months out, because those are the ones you forget about. You always remember the 1 to 3s, and you remember the ones that are over a year out. You forget about the ones that are hot, but just not quite there. Those slip through cracks all the time. Good CRM keeps you from doing that.
Yeah. And any CRM works, right? There's a bunch of them out
As
there
long as you know how
that
to
are
work it,
great.
it works.
Even if it's just yeah. I mean, even a spreadsheet's fine, but I've heard that so many times. I've heard I know a guy that, like, started with Zillow leads. So he would buy Zillow leads. He would become their buyer's agent. He would help them buy a house. It's a great business for him, right? And he helped them, like, 50 or 100 people buy a house. And then he never communicated with them again, other than, like, he would post things on Facebook. And then sometimes years later, when they would sell their house, they would reach back out to him. But there's, like, any one of those people that he sold a house to should be in his CRM, getting a periodic once a month, once every 6 months, once every 12 months, once a week, something reminding them, hey, I'm your agent. And if you ever want to sell your house, I can help you. Or, hey, I'm your agent. And sometimes that's a matter of, just showing them appreciation or things like that. And the other thing that happened was he would pay for a lead, get the lead. The person wasn't qualified to buy a house. they would usually just leave his lead list. Well, that can go in the CRM and say follow up once a month to see if they're qualified now, or help them get qualified, things like that. Something to where that person wants to buy a house. Someday they'll buy a house. Like, you have their info. And so much of being someone's agent is reminding them you're an agent. Like those guys that are scheduled for foreclosure, they just don't know an agent, right? When they bought their house, they bought it from a builder. They didn't have to use an agent at the time, because a lot of people buy from builders without agents. And so they didn't even know that the first step to do is hire an agent to sell their house. Right. And so sometimes you just have to remind people, like, hey, if you ever want to sell your house, like, I'm a good agent that can help you do that. And then, so it's like, there's the follow-up of the previous clients. There's the follow-up of the one, or those leads, like you said, where they go look at some houses. Maybe they even get qualified and they're like, look, we can only qualify for 300 right now, but we really want this $400,000 house. So we're going to wait until we make some more money. And then 6 months later, they go get requalified, and that mortgage broker is usually going to send them to their preferred agent and say, like, okay, now
Yep.
you've got 400,000. Let me introduce you to the right agent. So following up with people, if you've ever done a deal with them, they need to be in your CRM. If you've ever talked to them about real estate, they need to be in CRM. And there's a whole bunch of different categories. And a CRM is kind of sounds ominous and a pain in the butt to set up, but usually it's like a couple hours of work to do up front. And then you just need to put your new people in it, and then it kind of does its own thing. And so I think that's great advice on being able to keep the business going.
I mean, once you have the CRM, as a real estate agent, like, you can only talk about buying a house so much, right? You should be a connector. You are an advocate for your clients. You show value by giving people great advice and connecting them with people that they need, and you can continue to do that years after a sale closes. Like, you're an expert at this stuff, man. You know everybody in the industry. Like, if somebody needs a toilet, you know where to send them. If somebody needs a handyman, you know where to send them. And that stuff is invaluable because, like we said, you can only talk about buying a house so many times, and your average buyer, they're only buying a house once every, 6 to 9 years. So you stay in front of them by providing value during the downtimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Like that communication to stay top of mind, because you're right. Like, you had the story of, like, all the friends that would sell houses that they wouldn't even know you were an agent, and then they'd be like, "Oh, I didn't even know that you actually did that." I remember I would get stuff from people, and they would say, like, "Oh, I didn't even know you would do smaller deals. I thought you only did this kind." Or "I thought
Yeah.
you only did flips. I didn't know you would help with this." And so it is so much of being able to make sure people know, like, I can help solve your problem, and without coming off salesy. It's an art, it takes practice, but people do it. So let's talk about your investments. So I know that I mean, I think I know that Airbnb has been one of your, like, fun things you've been working on. Is that the biggest investment you've been focusing on, or what have you been doing?
Yeah. So over the last 5 or so years, I've been working for my company, Homecrest, which is essentially a regional, soon to be national, like, investment development real estate company, flips, small developments, etc., across all markets. Transitioning out of that, even though that company's still going with my new GM and a few other things, and really, we're focusing on a new type of real estate fund that allows people to invest in an STR event, short-term rental space, mid-term rental space, without having to be a daily operator and receiving all the benefits, distributions, and, tax breaks associated with that, but not having to put in the day to day. We're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, so I've had my share of Airbnbs. I love it as a business. It's a fun business, but it is a hard business. So I think I've shared it a million times on here. When if I have a house that's for rent, if I have a long-term renter in there, they've got a 12-month lease, and the AC goes out, then I have to tell them, okay, I called an AC company and they said they can be there on Monday, and I've done my part, and the tenant has to say okay, because that's, like, kind of the rule of rentals. Is it's like, crap happens and nobody can decide when it's going to happen, and so it's just about making the effort. And you're like, okay, the HVC guy said he can come on this day. In a short-term rental, if somebody shows up and it's 110 degrees in Austin and they get there and the AC's out and they call you and say the AC's out, you can't say, okay, I found an air conditioning person. They're going to be there Monday. The person's going to be gone by Monday. They're going to leave. They're going to get a refund from Airbnb. Like, you have to fix that problem right away. So it's two different versions of rentals. An Airbnb tenant is high maintenance. and they deserve that. They're having a 2 to 3 day experience. You're trying to give them a luxurious experience. And at times in my California spot, you've been to my California spot a couple times. It was a 10-acre like compound. People get married there. People do business retreats there. It was like 26 beds. It was great. It was an amazing place. But if somebody said like, "Hey, you don't have tinfoil here," right? I sent somebody to go get tinfoil. If they had any questions at all with anything, they needed help with anything, like we had the guys on site do it. We also had the landscapers would come by every single day. So if there was anything they needed, oh, we need more chairs for this, we need whatever, it's that high thing. Now the difference is, I think if you're going to take an average house, and I'm going to, and Paul, you can tell me if you kind of think the same thing. If a house on a long-term rent is going to rent for $3,000 a month, then kind of my rule of thumb is if it's a midterm rental, which means like a 1 month rental that's furnished, right? Short term 1 month rental that's furnished. Instead of $3,000 a month, you're going to be somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000. A midterm rental where somebody stays for a month is going to make you more than a regular rental, but not as much as an Airbnb. An Airbnb is someone comes for 2 or 3 days, right? So they're going to pay more. So a house that rents for 3,000 would midterm furnished rent for 4,500, but Airbnb, if done properly and rented, 3 to 4 days a week, is going to make you 6, 7, 8,000 bucks instead. Like double your standard rent, sometimes triple your standard rent is kind of the math that I use on these. And so before I go into more on that, do you kind of agree with that math? Do you have a different way you look at it?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. That is a great place to start. But when you're in the STR event space or anything that's short term, you are compensated differently. And the comparables, it's a DNA match when you're looking at a real estate comparable, right? Like everything rents for this in this area, or a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom house sells for this, with this amount of square footage. That is not the case with an STR. There are a lot of variables. There's luxury variables. There's how many beds, how many it sleeps comfortably variable. There's uh, attractions variables, there's amenities at the property variables. So we have a website where you can plug in a house and we'll do a very comprehensive analysis for you and tell you what we think it's going to make if you ever really want to dial that in. But yeah, I mean, your math is a great place to start. Is it accurate all the time? Not even close, dude. I mean, it's really case by case basis. And that's why we're so proud of this fund, because we've created a system that allows, institutional type investors to be able to deal with that without having to deal with it. Like you can play in that space with those profit margins, but you don't have to deal with the crap you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of summarizing and maybe getting into your offering, it's that idea that if somebody, the reason an investor would like buy a home, right, for an investment is there's tax advantages and they make money. The reason someone would Airbnb it instead of just rent it is they're going to make more money. The trade-off is it's a lot more work. If you want to just rent
Tons.
your house to a long-term renter, you might only hear from them once a month when they pay their rent. In the best cases, I've got plenty of houses that we never hear from the renters, that they just pay their rent. We don't hear from them for years. And we have others where renters call us all the time, but like on average, you can rent the house, you can make some money, you get that advantage. If you want to Airbnb it, you're going to make more. Otherwise, you wouldn't. You would do the easy version, right? So if you're going to Airbnb it and go through that effort, you have to make more than a regular rental, regardless of what that percentage is. And Paul's got this way to figure out, what that percentage really is. Maybe it's 5 times in some cases or 10 times in some cases. And I guess even my California property was like that. Cause when I think of like the probably the summer that COVID started, they rented for 2,000 bucks a night, 90 days in a row. Right. And that was, 10 times what I could have rented it for. It was crazy, but that was a very kind of unique time and it was unique property for that. But it was something. So what you guys are offering is like, hey, you've come up with a system where somebody can get the tax advantages of Airbnb. They can get the income advantages of an Airbnb without the pain in the butt of someone calling on a Friday saying the air conditioning's out. Right. So you guys have
Yeah.
your own team that are going to handle all that. So they get to have all the benefits of owning an Airbnb without the pain in the butt. Right. Which sounds like a pretty big thing. How has that been going? How long have you been like starting that fund or working on that?
So the fund specifically, not to rewind on you, buddy, but the reason why your house in California that I've been to is a multiplier of the math that we talked about is because it's a unique property with acreage. You can monetize that property multiple ways. Like you even said it, weddings, right? You've also got a really high sleep count. So when you can put 24 people in a large luxury type property, if you do the math, if you take all 24 of those people and get them a room at a comparably nice hotel, that $2,000 a night doesn't seem like that much money anymore.
Yeah.
So the hack is really this luxury market, and that's what our fund focuses on because that's where the huge margins really are. And we have to find that sweet spot in every market that we're in. As far as how it's doing, fund's relatively new, but we have our first asset in your backyard that you helped us out with down there in Austin. And we're in talks with two more assets, one in my backyard up in Portland, and we're about this close to a beautiful asset in Venice, California, right on the canals. So we're super excited about it.
Yeah. Sounds very cool. So and then what do you think the future holds this year for, I guess, one, real estate in general? It's like crystal ball stuff from the you've been in this,
Yeah.
you've seen a lot of well, you and I have seen a lot of cycles, right? We saw the
Gosh,
up,
we
we
have.
saw the down, right?
Yeah.
We saw the rebuild, we saw when the big funds came in 2012. So we've seen a lot of ups and downs in the cycle. We've seen, three or four big Fed changes, up and down, up and down. Policy changes, or when even like the newer thing of the Fannie Mae is going to buy back some government from mortgage bonds. Like we've seen this before. So, one, what do you think is going to happen with mortgage rates over the next year?
Mortgage rates have got to creep down. I don't think it's going to be aggressive, and I think it's going to be slower than everybody wants, but I think it's going to happen. Um, and that's going
Yeah,
to increase people's ability to purchase, which is definitely going to have an effect on value. It is not going to be as aggressive as people think. This is a very confusing market for people. And what that creates is a lot of hesitation. Um, so even if we are in a better market with rates, I really honestly believe that it's not going to have the direct effect that people expect or that we've had traditionally because we have a very volatile government, whether you're pro or against. We're not going there, but it's volatile. I don't think anybody can argue that. And things can change very quickly. And we've actually built this fund very specifically to address that. We have all of our assets are built out in these tranches. It's kind of like having a bunch of speedboats instead of one aircraft carrier. Like if rules start to change and markets start to shift, this allows us to stay nimble enough to catch up to the next big thing and pivot quickly. Which I think is why there hasn't been a lot of institutional money in this space, is because you know just ask anybody that had an Airbnb in Palm Springs. They said you can't do that anymore, and you have 1 year to sell. Guess what happens when you have to sell? You don't get market value. um,
yeah,
so I mean,
yeah.
that's kind of what I
there's a
see
lot of like
happening this
government
year.
impacts.
Yeah, there's
So
legislation is a huge factor, but we have three different pivots
what do
for
you think will
that. We
happen with
have the rent
Airbnbs?
space. What's that?
So Airbnbs in general, like, do you
Mhm.
think now most of those battles are kind of over with those municipalities? 'Cause there used to be a bunch of them. Even in Austin for a period of time, you couldn't have Airbnbs. Nashville, you couldn't. Now there most of the cities now have like rules and regulations, but do you feel like they're going to get more intense? The regulations are going to get harder, or do you think that most cities have kind of gone through that NIMBY cycle?
Well, personally, I'm a bit of a contrarian, right? So when people are running away, I'm running towards. And this is no exception. When there's a city that has the most ridiculously stringent and terrible like rules in regards to short-term rentals, I love that, because if you make yourself an expert in how to make it work in that market, it's not going to get any worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So you wrap that, you get a handle on that, you're gold. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do for people is put in that time and be those experts at every market on a micro level. It's really hard for larger institutional money to be able to manage this across the country because every single market is wildly different. Southern California, I'm learning, $10 million house, very low income for a really nice property because every property in Southern California is $10 million. Phoenix, Arizona, $5 million house can make almost $1 million a year in gross income based on amenities and sleep count because a $5 million house in Phoenix is gorgeous. And that's where the famous people stay. And that's where you have your corporate retreats. Portland, all over the board. If you're familiar with Portland, there's the tri-counties. You have Multnomah County, you have Washington County, and you have Clackamas County. Each one of those counties has different rules about STRs, and you have to understand that in order to maximize it. So that's what we do at a very high level.
Yeah.
And these markets, they're not going anywhere. People are going to travel. People need places to shoot content. People need places to have corporate retreats. People need places to get married. When we say STRs and we purchase very particular luxury assets, there's 5, 6, 7 ways to monetize that. We have an asset where people shoot commercials, and they pay a premium for using the property for 4 hours. And those are the things that we can pivot towards if we start receiving, pushback on legislation. But just to go back to the original point, yeah, if the market's really stringent and we still understand it and can operate there at a high level, that's our bread and butter. Everybody's running away from that. We're running towards it.
Yeah. Yeah, there are so many different types of Airbnbs. Like there's especially here in Austin, there's ones that are
Yeah.
themed for bachelorette parties. There are ones that are
Yeah.
themed for bachelor parties. There was one that we went to that was a pretty inexpensive house in an inexpensive neighborhood, but they had a decent sized backyard. They put a pickleball court in. They put an above ground pool and they decorated the inside with all these cute neon signs and Austin sayings. And so everybody loves it for like for content, for Instagram posts, again, for like little pickleball tournaments in the backyard. But it was like
Yeah.
an inexpensive house that they had set up the way to grow so much money because they had made it their own little custom thing because the pictures looked so cute that everyone's like, oh, I'm going to go there just to take the photos, right? Like just take the photos and be able to play, pickleball as part of this. Like people book it for birthday parties and things like that. So anyway, a lot of ways to slice that. I'm gonna tell a quick story and then we're gonna close this thing out. The our real estate rockstar, our mastermind, our Austin based mastermind is coming up in less than a month, about a month. Pretty excited to get so many of you guys back out here for it. And if you guys have been a part of the mastermind the past few years, you've heard this story. And I'm going to do the dumbed down quick version of this story, but I'm going to reshare it because Paul is one of the people in this story. And so I remember I think when you came to town and Marissa got to meet you, and I said, hey, this is Paul from the shoot. She like she knew so much about you just from hearing that. So the one of my fun stories is the time that I signed up to do an Ironman race. And at the time when I signed up for that, the most I'd ever run was a 5K. Some guys had kind of talked me into it as from part of our Go Abundance group, and I didn't really know what I was saying yes to. And so I, 3 or 4 months to train for this thing. I told everybody about it. I went to a training camp. I hosted a training camp. Did all this prep. Now, not as much prep as most people do at the time, but I did all this prep. I thought I was ready. I was nervous as heck. And and Paul and I shared a lot of like build up. There was one time he flew down to California so we could practice the swim together. He just stopped in just so we could both do an open water swim together because we were so nervous about this thing. So there was a lot of like prep. So we thought we were ready. We go into this race, and from on a personal level, we get to the swim, and right away it's horrible. And I saw a guy getting pulled out of the water that was unconscious. We had crazy waves. It was like crazy conditions. We were the last people to go in the water. And you have a certain amount of time you have to finish the swim. I want to say it's like an hour or an hour and 10 minutes or something. And I remember like barely getting out of the water in time. And when I pulled into the transition where you change from your wetsuit into your bike, they told me I had 3 minutes to make it out of that transition or I was going to get pulled from the race. I took too long, and they'd say like, you don't get to keep going. You're out. And so it's like so I grabbed most of my stuff. I took my bike out of the transition area to finish getting ready out there so they couldn't disqualify me. And then I went through the bike, and the bike was the thing I loved to do the most. But unfortunately, this whole race, you go up this like huge canyon out in Utah, and we're going up this canyon. It's super, super steep. And the exciting part was the last 10 miles is downhill. Well, yeah, and during that time, I saw Paul during part of the bike. He beat me in the swim. I got ahead of him, during the bike portion while we're going up this hill, I think is where it was. And at some portion, I got ahead of Paul. Going downhill, we get to the 10-mile downhill part and we're getting blasted by wind in the face. So instead of 10 miles just cruising home and getting to rest, I had to pedal downhill in order to make it. And again, I was fighting this clock. And I was fighting this clock. I had 4.5 hours to finish the bike part, and it was going to be cutting it so close. And I remember getting into the running station, and it was similar. It was like, you got 5 minutes to get out of here, or you're going to DNF. They like I say, do not finish. They're going to pull you from the race. And so I get through there, I get out there, and I go to start the run. I barely get out of there with, I think I've got 2 minutes to spare. And at that point, I said, Paul just got kicked out of the race. He didn't make it because I didn't see him behind me. I only did it by 2 minutes. So he got kicked out of the race. This is going to suck. Somewhere like 3 or 4 miles in, I finally I gave up. There's no better way to explain it other than it was hard. It was a rough time. And I started walking and I couldn't get to rest, and I couldn't get myself to start jogging again. And it didn't matter that I had told thousands of people that it was there. It didn't matter that people were waiting for me at the end of this race. I had given up, and I was like so ashamed and so sad and so everything. And that's what I call Paul, my phoenix, the rise from the ashes. So I'm at this point where I have, it's supposed to be a really fun experience. We're out in Utah, all this prep, and I was at like just a lifetime low of like, I've given up. I can't keep going. I'm ashamed of myself, and I just couldn't muscle through it, couldn't brain through it. And all of a sudden, Paul comes jogging up behind me. And he says, hey, I've been trying to catch you for a while. Like, I've been seeing you up here. And I said, oh my God, you're still in the race. I thought you disqualified. And he's like, no, I'm here. I still did it. And I'm like, oh my God. And Paul said something like, so should we finish this race? And we started jogging again. And, and the long story short is we finished the rest of our way in. I think we made it with like 6 minutes to spare. Again, like you have 8.5 hours to finish. I think this is our very first race. We made it with like 6 minutes to spare. When we got down to the last mile, a bunch of our friends were waiting for us, kind of every 100 yards, clapping for us, cheering for us. It was pretty awesome. But it was one of those stories of why I think so fondly of Paul, why we have some of those kind of life experiences we get ourselves into, and some of those crazy, crazy moments. So for those of you guys that have heard the story before, past, Paul is that guy. Paul is that phoenix that showed up. Had he not, I would have never done more Ironmans after that. It would not have turned out to be one of the happiest, fun, memories of my life. And so sometimes people just impact you in ways without even knowing they're going to, right? So Paul just finished the race himself. Like he just showed up but it was a miracle in my story. So Paul, if someone wants to reach out to you to learn more about how to do Airbnb, or if they want to, if they have somebody up in the Portland area that's going to get foreclosed on, they want you to help sell their house, they want to send you that referral, or they're interested in investing in your business, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Oh man, there's a couple. So the property management company, staysavvy.biz, STAYSAVVY.biz. That's where you can click on the evaluate my home, and we'll get a report to you in about 48 hours. And that report does include long-term, short-term, and STR, and a breakdown of why. That's totally free. The fund, you can get me on my email. You can also inquire at allurianfund.com, ALUREAN. And heck, you can just call me if you want to. I'll let Aaron pass on my cell phone number here. And I got to add to that story, man.
Yeah, no,
I'll never forget.
I was going to say, go ahead and give them your cell phone number right here. Go ahead and give them your cell phone number right here, and then you can finish the story.
It's 503-307-0769. And we walked in to sign up for that race. It was in St. George, Utah. And the lady that took my registration, I'll never forget. She said, "Is this your first Ironman?" And I said, "Yes." And she just started laughing, tears coming down her face. And she said, "Do you know what you did?" And I was like, "No, my buddy's talking me into this." And she was like, "This is the hardest Ironman course in the world." So we accidentally got roped into that. So
every one of them were so much easier after that. Every race I did after that was easy.
No, man, you did it, and we showed up, so we might as well finish. That's my mindset. And that was a
Yeah.
good moment for me too, buddy. Like, I'll
Well,
never
Paul,
forget
it
it.
was we will never forget it. It was great having you on the show today. Always great catching up. I think we talked about a lot of different things today that I think are great tips for people. We talked about kind of how to start a business, kind of that boring part. We talked about lead gen and CRM. We talked about Airbnb and the difference between good ones, bad ones, and some of those opportunities out there. If you guys have any interest at all, yeah, you should reach out to Paul. If you've got somebody that needs to do some business up there in Portland, or you want to know about, Paul is a giver. So you want to get some advice on your Airbnb, advice about strategy, advice if you're buying the right one. I would definitely reach out to him if I was you. And just as a quick reminder, I mentioned it, just a few minutes ago. We are a month away from our Real Estate Rockstars Mastermind in Austin, and I am so pumped. We have got some of the coolest speakers travel around from all over the place. A cool venue right down the road from my office here in Austin. We've got over 100 people, 100 of you agents that are flying out here. And I'm most excited to meet some of you guys that have never attended before, that were just listeners of the podcast, that sometime in the last 6 months, you heard us talk about it and you took that risk to say, hey, I need one of these changes in my life. I'm going to go. So for those of you that have signed up to come meet us for the first time, your first time in Austin, most of you, your first event of this type ever, I can't wait to meet you when you come out. Be sure to say hi. Again, it'll be end of February as we knock it out. So the Paul, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, especially from Greece and Real Estate Rockstars.
Appreciate you, my
Thanks
friend.
for listening.
Hey, I got to tell you, go to that event if you get a chance. The most improvement I've ever made in my business from a single event was going to this thing with Aaron, and he did not pay me to say that. Um, we made drastic changes in 48 hours just from being there. You will not regret it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right.
It's
Thanks again,
legit,
Paul
buddy.
and Real Estate Rockstars. Thanks for listening.